Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. So, been a while since we talked about literary Bond on this channel, huh?
Where the hell have you been?
Just to explain a little about why it's been 2 years since my last book review, well, there was this pandemic that hit the world, and it became very clear to me during that I actually only really read on my commute to work, and because I was having to work from home for such a long period of time, I just kind of got out of the habit of reading, and I was kind of in a place where after Icebreaker I felt like I needed a little bit of a break from the John Gardner books anyway, and I think I took that a little bit to the extreme by going this long before finally finishing one. But yeah, I'm back commuting now, so I'm getting back into the routine of it, and I do love a Bond book for my commute. Go through a couple of chapters a day usually, so yeah, I'm trying my best to go through these things in the chronological order, so that brings us to the fourth John Gardner book, Roll of Honor. A book that I took an immediate dislike to, given the fact that Honor was missing a U, and for some reason Amazon sent me an edition that totally doesn't match with all of the other Gardners that I own so far, so I'm even contemplating trying to find one that will actually fit in this thing. Like, I'm happy to double dip on a book so that it will look nice on my shelf. That's the level of Bond obsession that I'm at. Okay, so a little recap on the Gardner novels so far. I felt like things got off to a perfectly average, perfectly run-of-the-mill start with License Renewed before moving on to the absolute crazy town of For Special Services with its mind control ice cream villain living on a reproduction of the set from Gone with the Wind, Blofeld's daughter being the head of Spectre. Like, all that stuff was really silly and kind of stupid, but it's easily the best experience that I've had with John Gardner's work so far. His third, Icebreaker, I know from comments and discussions that I've had with people that it's generally considered to be one of his better ones, and I liked it. I didn't love it. I think that the Gardners are going to be, for me, I don't get much out of him so far when he's trying to be serious and grounded. I think that if I am going to enjoy these books, it's going to be from when he does get silly and ridiculous, because I just feel that so far his writing does not have that same poetry or the sweep of the Ian Fleming writing, and that might change, we'll see, but this fourth book is not gonna change my perception. So, Roll of Honor, I'll try to cover the broader strokes of the plot. It opens with an art heist in the opening chapter, which I thought was quite interesting and a good hook into the thing. And then after that, we catch up with James Bond, who receives word that he is receiving a large inheritance from his Australian uncle Bruce, who has recently passed away. We're back in that Gardner crazy town again. He does what any sensible person would do with such a large inheritance and buys a Bentley with it. So long, Silver Beast from the last few Gardners. And he starts to live this kind of hedonistic lifestyle, and he resigns from the Secret Service, and all of this is apparently happening very much in the public eye. Like, there are lines in here about the press and tittle-tattle in the gentlemen's clubs and whatever, and it is weird that James Bond is this kind of celebrity in this universe. It feels really odd given that he's supposed to be a covert operative, but whatever. All is not what it seems with this resignation, though, and I'm really happy actually that I watched for the first time The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, based on the John le Carré novel, obviously. I'm really glad that I saw that, because Gardner is clearly lifting this concept from that story, but rather Bond is just he's just appearing to have left the service so that he can infiltrate the organization of a villain by the name of J. Autumn Holy. He's set up as the main villain of the thing, a brilliant programmer who used to work at the Pentagon in the United States before faking his death and opening a video games company called Endor. And yeah, every time I read that word, I just kept thinking he was like the king of the Ewoks or something. The company makes games based on real-world battles, so Brad Whitaker from The Living Daylights would have been a fan.
War. War has always been man's main occupation. You know, fools tell us his greatest accomplishments were the wheel or the alphabet. I say it's a battering ram and gunpowder.
As well as the analog stick and Crash Bandicoot, of course.
In the early chapters of the book, Bond is paired up with Holy's ex-wife, Persephone Percy Proud. She's a CIA agent who is tasked with teaching Bond about code and programming so that he can he has this information for when he's infiltrating Holy's organization. Obviously, this thing is being published in the 80s, and some of these chapters, they're 40 years out of date, and you can tell that it's explaining the concept of computers to the reader. So some of it's quite sweet reading it like now, obviously, where, I've got a thing in my pocket that can do far more advanced things than what computers could back then. But even then, I'm not a tech whiz. I don't know code and programming and all that kind of stuff, so I still actually quite appreciated some of those chapters, and there was some little facts and little things in them that I was like, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that. I don't know if someone with far more knowledge about code and programming and whatnot would read those chapters and completely balk, it might be complete nonsense technically, I don't know, but for the story, I kind of liked it, it kind of harkens back to when Fleming would just be interested in the mafia, and then we'd get passages just about how the mafia operates, and it feels like the author has done a lot of research into this himself, and he's conveying that to the reader in an interesting way, so I kind of enjoyed those chapters, actually. But nonetheless, Bond is being taught all of this stuff so that he can infiltrate Endor and lower the Death Star shield. Infiltrate Holy's organization, gain his confidence, and find out what his whole villainous scheming is about. Now, I need to talk about the characters and the rest of this story in a very general sense, because I'll be damned if I can sum up this thing in a coherent way. It's messy as anything, and for a while I genuinely thought that the blurb of the book had the wrong text printed on it, because, this is what it says. Following scandal and his shocking resignation from Britain's secret intelligence service, James Bond becomes a gun for hire, able and willing to sell his lethal skills to the highest bidder, and Spectre, it seems, are eager to have the disgraced British super spy on their payroll. But before he can be fully embraced by his new employer and deadliest enemy, 007 must first prove his loyalty, and in doing so, he must threaten with nuclear annihilation everything he has fought his whole life to defend, until honor is fully restored. Thing is, Spectre aren't even mentioned in this thing until about halfway through the story, and it's about art heists and computers and whatnot, so there's no mention of nuclear annihilation, so I genuinely thought that the blurb of this was misprinted from another Gardner story or something. But yeah, J. Autumn Holy is revealed to be a Spectre agent, which I kind of wish that it wasn't on the back of this thing. I feel like it would have been a much greater surprise if that was a reveal, but I liked the idea of Bond infiltrating Spectre, becoming an agent of theirs, undercover. I think that is really phenomenal setup. But it's weird because in this story, they know that he's James Bond, and I can't imagine why they would think it would be a good job to have. I mean, it kind of plays out in there is some double-crossing and twists going on, but even for Bond to believe that Spectre would be in any way willing to have him around, given that he killed their two previous leaders, both of the Blofelds. He's put through a few trials and he has to earn his place, as it were. But this is still the organization that killed his wife? I don't... Yeah, the fact that he thinks that they think that he's a good fit for them just never worked for me. Like I say, as the story plays out, there are reasons why they are kind of happy to have him there, but it was messy and didn't really work for me. And it turns out that J. Autumn Holy, while he's the main villain of this story, he's not actually the head of Spectre. The head of Spectre ends up being a guy called Tamil Rahani, who isn't even in this story an awful lot, but I'll just say that there are way too many characters in this. As well as Holy and Rahani, there is another guy called General Rolling Joe Zwingli, who is introduced as a villain, and he has quite an introduction, but he barely does anything in this story, and there are a whole bunch of female characters in this, and there are romantic entanglements between the various characters. It's kind of like a soap opera with who Holy's entangled with, but some of these relationships we're just being told about. We're not seeing them play out or affect the story in any way. It's just oh yeah, she copped off with him. Okay. So, there's Percy Proud, who was formerly married to J. Autumn Holy, and she's kind of the main Bond girl of this, I'd say. I mean, she makes it to the end anyway, and Then there's Freddie Fortune and Cindy Charmer, and God, the alliteration of these names, it's like a Bond story is written by John Waters. And then, yeah, there's Dazzle, who is J. Autumn Holy's current wife, but she's actually having an affair with Tamil Rahani. And kind of just adding to the sort of exasperation that I have with all of the characters and names, like, some of them are going under aliases or have double names. So, like, Holy goes by the name of Jason St. John Fiennes, and then there's talk about how Percy Proud had like a lot of plastic surgery and how she looks different to how she used to, and I'm thinking that all of this is kind of like the basis for some double crossing or reveals that's gonna, like some shock reveal that's gonna come later on, but none of it ever really amounts to anything. I guess the big twist of the thing really is just that Tamil Rahani is revealed to be the head of Spectre, and while Holy is definitely the main villain of this story, Rahani, like, ranks higher, I guess. Like, he's, I suppose, gonna be coming back in future books. He makes out of this story alive by the end of it. But I'm surprised that Rahani didn't really have much of a presence in this story at all. I mean, he is the head of Spectre, after all. Even in, like, Thunderball, for instance, Fleming's Thunderball, where Blofeld isn't exactly the main villain, he's still the head of Spectre, he has such a presence in that, like 1 or 2 chapters that he's in, and he has such a shadow which is cast throughout the rest of the story. Here with Rahani, there's really none of that. I feel like even Blofeld's daughter being the head of Spectre in For Special Services had a certain kind of campiness to it, a certain soapy notoriety that is completely missing here. Rahani, as far as I'm concerned from this book, is a blank slate. And fair enough, maybe this is just set up, maybe he will be developed more in a future story or future stories. I don't know if he returns, but I know that I have an awful lot of John Gardner books to get through, so I'm assuming that he will pop up at some point. So anyway, that's all the characters. The plot ends up being about achieving these nuclear codes, and specifically dismantling the nuclear deterrence of the United States, so that the Soviet Union has an advantage. There's a bit of a twist in here because Holy and the General are wanting to dismantle both sides, both superpowers, but Rahani wants to give the Soviets the advantage, which, as a Spectre plot, feels really odd because Spectre in the past have always been about playing all sides for fools, right? Like, they are this separate entity, kind of away from the global political situation. So it feels odd that Rahani here is very much planting his flag in, now we're all for the communists, actually. Anyway, the climax of this thing takes place on a Goodyear blimp, because why not? But it was giving me, like, kind of pleasant flashbacks to A View to a Kill, which I guess did that come out after this book? 1984. John Gardner beat the film series to the blimp climax concept. So it's on the blimp, and Bond is there with the General and Holy, and they're both killed, and then Rahani parachutes out of the thing, which totally comes out of nowhere, by the way. Like, the blimp pilot is just like, oh yeah, that guy you're looking for? He went out the door in a parachute. And Bond is, like, looking at him like, oh great, well, you know, they'll pick him up, so let's just carry on. There's this whole fight on this thing, there's this whole sequence on this blimp, and this pilot, this blimp pilot, he's called Nick, and his name sticks in my head more than some of the actual important supporting characters in this, even though he is literally just the blimp pilot. He has, like, lines of dialogue and observations and stuff that are just so bizarre. So after all of this, Bond foils the villain's plans to get these nuclear codes, and then they land the blimp, and he meets up with M and the MI6 lot, and then it's just like, yeah, Rahani got away, grr, damn it. The thing's kind of finished off with these pretty weak chapters at the end of Bond and Percy romancing. They're on holiday together, and then they decide that their lines of work, they just can't make a romantic relationship work together, so it's got that kind of melancholy ending that Fleming had in, like, you know, Moonraker, for instance. I've not done a very good job of summing up the plot there, because genuinely it is very messy, and some of the A to B to C stuff, I like how it goes from the art heist to computer programming to Bond being recruited by Spectre to nuclear codes, like that, like some of the things I'm like, I would get halfway through a chapter and be kind of like, wait a minute, what did that other thing have to do with this? And then I would have to, like, go back and reread. Like, genuinely, I reread the opening few chapters of this a couple of times just to make sure if I was getting everything, and then I just felt like, oh, whatever. This is definitely my least favorite of the Gardners so far. I thought that it was incredibly scatty and kind of all over the place with far too many characters. Some that didn't even really serve much of a purpose by the end of it. This new inception of Spectre and its leader, I'm unsure about. Like, the whole Spectre plan in this, it doesn't feel in character for the organization, and I appreciate that this is a new regime. Maybe it will be expanded upon better in later stories, but just in this one, it didn't feel like Spectre to me. And perhaps most importantly, Bond just doesn't really feel like the classic Fleming Bond in this. I like that the Silver Beast has made its way to the scrap heap. I think giving him a Bentley feels much more in character, but particularly in like passages like when he's having the briefings with M and Tanner, like some of that stuff just feels so not Bond. The attempts that Gardner makes to kind of fulfill that Bond lifestyle quota that Fleming would offer, what food is he eating, what drinks, the tailoring, or all that kind of stuff. Gardner's attempts at capturing that, I don't know if it is just because it's the 80s and it just doesn't feel as classy or classic, but at one point Bond is described as eating a chicken vindaloo in this story, and nothing against chicken vindaloos. I love chicken vindaloos. But it's just such like an odd, like, it's to me like describing, Bond went and ordered a margarita pizza at the Pizza Hut, and I'm like, it just doesn't feel like right for this character. I don't know. And there's just not really much of a sense of place. I thought that some of the earlier chapters set in Monte Carlo did a good job of capturing that, but as the story goes on, I just don't even... Like the Flemings, like the locations are almost characters in themselves, and the way they're described is so memorable. Like, it really sticks in your head, even like so many years after I've read some of them. Here in Gardner's, like I think I said previously as well, that for Special Services was probably his most successful in terms of location for me. And a part of that is purely because he just said, that film, Gone with the Wind? Well, this villain lives in that set. And so that helped with that, and I don't think that that's terribly well earned. But yeah, the plot shifts around all over the place. I felt like it could have done with really being streamlined in terms of characters and story, because some of the fun stuff is a bit lost in these complicated entanglements that I don't think are entirely necessary. So yeah, not one that I'm going to be revisiting anytime soon, I don't think. I'm going to start ending these Gardner videos by ranking them, because to stop them kind of merging into like one entity in my mind. So top for me in terms of how much I enjoyed the book is for Special Services. Second, I think I am going to go with Icebreaker, actually. It's probably the best written of the books that I've read so far. Then there's License Renewed, which I think is not too far below from Icebreaker. I felt like it was a bit of a enjoyable enough kind of run-of-the-mill start to things. And then there's a big old gap, and then we have Roll of Honor. Thank you for watching this review of John Gardner's 4th Bond book. Next time we will, of course, be talking about the next in his series, Nobody Lives Forever. And yeah, if you've read this book, please do let me know down in the comments section below. I find it really helpful and interesting to hear people's comments about, particularly these, like some of the lesser explored territory of literary Bond, I guess. Like, obviously, with the Fleming books, you can find a lot of opinions and discussions, and a lot of people have read them. I don't know that many people who've actually read the Gardners, so I really appreciate the comments. They kind of help me, form some of my own opinions as well. So, yes, if you've read this, please do let me know in the comments below, and also how you feel like it ranks up with the previous 3 Gardners. And yeah, hell, go ahead and spoil it for me. Does Tamil Rahani reappear later in the series? I'm fascinated to know. Also below, you can click the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button to stay super up to date on future video uploads that I'll be making on this channel. Also below are links to my social media pages. So there is my Facebook page, my Twitter page, and my Instagram page. Oh, and my Patreon page for those of you who want to go one extra step in supporting this channel. And with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.